My name is Victoria Lamp, and this is my final product for my EDUC 660 course through Concordia. This is the last component of the toolkit project, and it will be discussing the concept of effectiveness and efficiency for educators or teachers. So first I want to talk about what it is to be effective. As a teacher, you hear that everything you do in the classroom has to be effective or leave an impact on a student, which is 100% true. Without that effectiveness, the student would not gain the knowledge that they need to gain and therefore would not necessarily learn everything that they needed to learn. So how is being effective, or how is effective defined? I think that being effective is something that teachers are able to do with the content. It's taking the content and relaying that information to the students in a way that they can not only understand it, but they can connect to it, and that connection is then pulled into their lives somehow. They somehow form that bond with what you're teaching, and it just makes sense. When that happens, it's this like magical moment in a classroom, and you can see it happening. Just like you can kind of see the wheels in someone's head turning when they're thinking. It's when you are truly an effective teacher, you are seeing them not only learn the material and hear the material, but truly process that material. And it is therefore imprinted, in a sense, in their brains. And I think that when that happens, it's a beautiful thing, but in our society, being effective has kind of an objective definition, which is my next point. How is one considered effective or not? I think that it is very challenging in the world, in the realm of education today, to teach and to not be effective. Um, but I also think it's a process that is completely objective. So if I think I'm being effective on a student or on their learning, I'm seeing them gain knowledge. I'm seeing them make progress. I'm seeing them have the capability of doing everything that they need to do on a daily basis. Someone coming into my classroom to determine that effectiveness may not necessarily see that and therefore deem me as maybe not so not effective or ineffective, but not as effective as I should be. But I do think that sometimes that effectiveness doesn't always happen all the time. You are not going to affect every single student with every single lesson, every single period of every single day. It's just an impossible feat that I don't necessarily see as something that could be accomplished. So then therefore, if you're not effective, what are your next steps? This class kind of really taught me that when you do something and it doesn't work and you see it not working, it's okay to kind of backtrack and redo it. So by using methods in a classroom that kind of avoid those mistakes, you know, Dr. Archer talks a lot about the I do, we do, you do process. And I used this similarly in my classroom before, but not necessarily every day. And I noticed that when I didn't use it, when I became aware of it through this course, I was realizing that I was having to backtrack on a lot of what I was doing and what I was teaching. Um, and, Dr. Archer also talks about this whole concept of anticipate and remove. So anticipate what they're not going to understand, anticipate those mistakes, and remove them ahead of time will therefore promote the effectiveness of the lesson that it has on the student. Um, and all of this kind of comes full circle with the concept of how does one become effective for all students. And, it's a very important concept to have that inclusivity in your classroom and not just be effective for Johnny or for Sally or for Susie, but for the entire class, to look at the class as a whole and say, how can I truly affect all of these students so they're all gaining that knowledge? And I think that that's a difficult task that teachers deal with, and I think it's a concept that many of us don't quite grasp as new teachers, especially within your first 5 years, and I'm about to go into my fifth, and it's something that I haven't fully figured it out yet, but this course has definitely helped me understand my steps and how to get there, and understand how to make things a little bit easier on me to teach, because I'm doing the simple steps that I was negating before. Which brings me to my next point, is being an efficient professional educator. So we talk about being effective, but also being efficient. So how is efficiency defined in a world of education? I think a lot of people think of efficiency as something that can be done quickly or something that can be done right away. But efficiency is that, but it's completing a task, it's completing something in a way that it's done quickly, but it also needs to be done well. And I think that well part is kind of overlooked sometimes. So to me, efficiency is being able to take a task, or to take a unit or a novel or a book and teach it in this time, this time crunch that I have in a curriculum, but doing so in a way that I'm still relaying all of those important facts and content related material that my students need to gain. So how can one be efficient and still remain effective? And I think that that's the golden question. How do you do and complete tasks in an efficient manner, but still remain that effective educator that's getting everyone to learn? And I don't think that that's an impossible feat to accomplish. I think that it's very challenging to learn how to do that, and I think it takes a lot of practice to learn how to do that. And sometimes when you focus more so on the efficiency, the effectiveness is lost along the way. But sometimes when you focus on efficiency, the effectiveness is heightened. For example, I looked at the vocabulary lesson that we had to do in this classroom, or in this course, excuse me. And I kind of sat back and realized, okay, well, I mean, I teach vocab for my students and in the units, but it's not something that I 100% stress in my regular education classes. It's not something that I say, okay, today we're going to do a 10-minute vocab lesson. And then I realized that, well, maybe this is something I should be doing. I speak to them with an elevated academic vocabulary and they're hearing vocab, but are they actually seeing the vocab? Dr. Archer talked about not just those auditory cues, but giving them those visual examples and not just the verbal examples. So for me, I took the opportunity to create a vocabulary lesson for the Odyssey, and using those literary elements and those literary terms that they need to know, that are kind of transcendental from freshman English to senior English and then beyond into college. And I tried to connect them in ways to their world that would help them understand, by using those examples, by using those non-examples, which for me was a challenge. It was a challenge to come up with a non-example of a metaphor. But I was able to accomplish that. And then when I implemented that lesson into my classroom, it was an amazing experience. My students, who they've heard metaphor, they've heard simile, they've heard imagery, they've heard all of those concepts before, but they were able to display them in a way that was truly 100% understanding. So for me, it took a little bit of an extra time. So the efficiency was lacking, but the effectiveness was heightened. So therefore, is it okay sometimes to relinquish some of that efficiency to heighten that effectiveness? And I think that for me, that's kind of where my qualm comes in, and it's something that I really struggle with. Even though that it is something that I struggle with, I think it's a very important question to be asking. You know, you got to find that ebb and flow, that give and take. And one of the things in my toolkit that I'm submitting is this Assume-Aside management kind of video that we had to watch by Dr. Archer. And this one hit me and affected me the most. That every time I choose not to model something, I choose to model it many times. And it is the complete truth. If I am not effectively modeling something in my classroom, how can I then assume, or how can I then believe that my students will have the understanding, which then lessens my efficiency. So the before viewing video talked about, what are some things that you want your students to learn next year? And for me, I really, really want to have them understand their expectations for homework, for raising their hand, for attendance, for late policy, for the tardy policy, stuff like that. And it seems trivial as a high school teacher, but in reality, it's this structure that I think is a lost art, and it's something that students don't necessarily have or experience in their classroom anymore. So I think when we talk about being an effective and efficient teacher, it's establishing these routines. It's modeling something over and over until they get it down as a routine. And it's eliminating those assumptions, because when you do so, you are effectively reaching all of your students. You are effectively portraying all of your expectations, and therefore that efficiency rate is going to skyrocket. For my students, it's more so this assumption that I believe that they should have skills, that they should have a certain skill set when they get to high school. And I think that's also become this assumption within our society that as students get to a certain age, they should just know to do things. But that's not necessarily the case. So I made that assumption, which then caused my students, caused me to not model my expectations, which then caused my effectiveness as a teacher to lessen and my efficiency to lessen as well. So I think that from reading and watching this Assume-A-Side video and doing this work on this, it really truly triggered to me and gave me the key almost to establish that effectiveness in how I teach, my expectations, my routines, and to model them. So therefore, later on down the road, the efficiency goes up and the effectiveness of the lessons that I'm now teaching goes up as well, because they understand the routines that go with those lessons. This class has truly given me awesome tools and a great understanding of how I need to improve as a teacher and the ways to do so. And I think that Dr. Archer's techniques and skills and the skill sets that she's bestowed upon us as students will forever change how I teach, and will also forever change how I interact with my students, with my colleagues. And I think that this class was a very beneficial class. And that is all I have to say about the effectiveness and efficiency of a professional educator in our educational society today.